Welcome, the most captivating science fiction stories where mystery, action, and love intertwine are here. Subscribe now and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode. Thomas Hartwell stood in his kitchen at 3:17 in the morning, staring at what could only be described as the aftermath of a very considerate apocalypse. His pantry door hung open like a guilty mouth, revealing gaps where his emergency rations of Centauri beans had once stood in neat rows. The magnetic seals on his food preservation units blinked amber warnings, their contents mysteriously diminished but not entirely depleted. Even his grandmother's recipe for synthetic apple pie, the one he'd programmed into the molecular assembler just yesterday, had vanished, leaving only a few holographic crumbs scattered across the counter like digital fairy dust. "Well," he muttered to his reflection in the darkened window, "either I've developed the galaxy's most polite case of sleepwalking, or someone's been playing house with my kitchen." This marked the third incident in as many weeks. Thomas ran a weathered hand through his graying hair, a habit his late wife Aelina used to tease him about. She'd called it his Professor Pose, though he'd retired from active xenobotany research 5 years ago when they'd settled on New Terra Colony. The irony wasn't lost on him that he'd spent decades studying alien plant life across 17 different worlds, only to find himself baffled by mysterious disappearances in his own suburban kitchen. The house felt too quiet around him, the way it always did during these sleepless hours. The atmospheric processors hummed their eternal lullaby beyond the reinforced windows, maintaining the perfect oxygen-nitrogen balance that made this little corner of the galaxy habitable for human lungs. But Thomas found himself listening for something else, the subtle sounds that didn't belong to the mechanical symphony of colonial life. He activated the security console with a gesture, watching the holographic displays flicker to life above the kitchen island. The motion sensors showed nothing unusual, just the expected thermal signatures of his automated systems and the occasional flutter of his prized vegan night-blooming orchids in the conservatory. His insurance company would have a field day if they knew he was essentially running a xenobotanical preserve in his retirement, but some habits died harder than others. "Computer," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "run a comprehensive scan of the house perimeter." "Scanning," came the melodious reply of the domestic AI. "No unauthorized life signs detected. All entry points secure. Shall I increase sensitivity parameters?" Thomas frowned at the scattered evidence of his midnight visitor. Whoever was doing this possessed either advanced stealth technology or an intimate knowledge of his security systems. Neither possibility filled him with confidence. He designed the house's defenses himself, incorporating lessons learned from 40 years of fieldwork on worlds where the local flora occasionally developed a taste for human flesh. The refrigeration unit chimed softly, drawing his attention to its status display. Someone had accessed it approximately 2 hours ago, but the biometric locks showed no record of the event. Impossible unless... Thomas felt a familiar tingle of scientific curiosity, the same sensation that had driven him to catalog over 3,000 species of potentially sentient plant life across the outer rim. He moved to his workstation in the corner of the kitchen, where Aelina used to joke he conducted more experiments than most university labs. The quantum scanner he'd liberated from his old research vessel hummed to life, casting eerie blue light across the room as it analyzed molecular traces left by his uninvited guest. "Interesting," he murmured, studying the readouts. The scanner had detected amino acid chains that didn't match any species in the colonial database. Not human, certainly, but not entirely alien either. The protein structures suggested a humanoid physiology, but with subtle variations that made his scientific mind race with possibilities. A soft thud from the direction of the pantry made him freeze. Thomas grabbed the first weapon he could find, a titanium mixing spoon that Aelina had always claimed could double as a club, and crept toward the sound. The floor's haptic feedback system automatically muted his footsteps, a feature he'd installed after too many late-night snack runs had woken his sleeping wife. Another sound, this one definitely not mechanical. Someone was attempting to open one of his storage containers, and from the frustration evident in their movements, they weren't having much success with the molecular locks. Thomas almost felt sorry for them. He'd programmed those seals to respond only to his genetic signature, a paranoid precaution left over from his research days when rival botanists occasionally tried to steal his specimens. He peered around the corner and saw a shadow crouched near his emergency food supplies, silhouetted against the soft glow of the nutrition indicator panels. The figure moved with an economy of motion that spoke of desperation tempered by caution, like someone who had learned to be grateful for whatever scraps they could find. Thomas cleared his throat softly, not wanting to startle his visitor into doing something they'd both regret. The shadow froze, and he could practically feel the wave of panic radiating from the figure huddled among his food stores. "I've got to say," Thomas said conversationally, keeping his voice low and non-threatening, "you've got excellent taste in midnight snacks. Those Centauri beans are imported, and the preservation matrix alone cost me half a month's pension." The figure didn't move, but Thomas caught a glimpse of what looked like an uncommonly long ear poking out from beneath a makeshift hood. His xenobiological training kicked in automatically, cataloging details even as he tried to process the implications of what he was seeing. "The thing is," he continued, settling his back against the wall and sliding down to sit on the floor, making himself less intimidating, "I'm not actually angry. Confused, yes. Scientifically fascinated, absolutely, but not angry. My late wife always said I had a soft spot for strays, though I think she was talking about the mutant space orchids I kept bringing home." A soft sound escaped from the shadows, something between a sob and a laugh. Thomas felt his heart clench with unexpected sympathy. Whatever was happening here, whoever this person was, they were clearly at the end of their rope. "Look," he said, "I'm going to stand up very slowly and turn on the ambient lighting. Nothing dramatic, just enough so we can see each other properly. I promise I'm not armed with anything more dangerous than a really sturdy mixing spoon." The ambient lighting bloomed softly throughout the kitchen, revealing a scene that made Thomas's breath catch in his throat. His mysterious visitor sat cross-legged on the floor, clutching a wheel of synthetic cheese against her chest like a shield, tears streaming down her dirt-streaked face. But it was her ears that made him blink twice, elegant, elongated curves that swept back from her skull in graceful arcs, unmistakably alien yet hauntingly beautiful. "Well," Thomas said after a moment, his voice carefully casual, "that explains why my motion sensors kept missing you. Those ears probably give you incredible spatial awareness." The woman looked up at him with eyes that held depths of sorrow he recognized all too well. She said something in a melodious language that made his universal translator chirp uncertainly in his ear, then switched to heavily accented standard Galactic. "Please," she whispered, "I am very sorry for taking food. I will leave now." "Absolutely not," Thomas replied, settling more comfortably on the floor. "First rule of xenobiology, never let an interesting specimen escape before you've had a proper conversation. And second rule of basic human decency, nobody leaves my house hungry if I can help it." She blinked at him in confusion, clutching the cheese more tightly. Thomas couldn't help but smile at the absurdity of the situation. Here he was, having a heart-to-heart with what appeared to be the galaxy's first documented elf, while she held his emergency cheddar hostage. "What's your name?" he asked gently. "Lyralei," she replied, then added something that sounded like a formal title in her own language. "Beautiful name. I'm Thomas, and before you ask, yes, I know you're not human. Those ears are a dead giveaway, though I have to say they're far more elegant than the biomods some colonists get these days. I once knew a woman who had her ears surgically enhanced to look like a Rigelian fruit bat. Not nearly as aesthetically pleasing." Despite her obvious fear, Lyralei's mouth twitched in what might have been the beginning of a smile. She gestured to her ears with one hand, never releasing the cheese wheel with the other. Alien, she said simply, as if that explained everything. Thomas felt his scientific mind kick into overdrive. Alien, he'd heard whispers about that species in the Outer Rim colonies. Their homeworld had been destroyed in some catastrophic event, leaving scattered refugees across the galaxy. Most xenobiologists considered them extinct, or at least so rare that confirmed sightings were academic legend. Alien, he repeated thoughtfully. That would make you considerably rarer than my most prized specimens. No wonder you're having trouble finding work. Her face crumpled slightly at his words. No work, no papers, no, how you say. Existence in your systems. I am ghost person. Ah, bureaucracy, Thomas nodded sagely. The universe's most efficient method for making people disappear without actually killing them. My wife used to say that if you really wanted to torture someone, just send them to the colonial registration office with incomplete paperwork. Lyralei's head tilted curiously, those remarkable ears shifting like satellite dishes focusing on a signal. Wife, Elena, she died 2 years ago. Cancer, the old-fashioned kind that laughs at all our fancy medical technology. Thomas found himself smiling at the memory instead of feeling the usual pang of loss. She would have loved meeting you. Always said the universe was too big for humans to be the only interesting species in it. I am sorry for your loss, Lyralei said formally, her accent making the words sound like a ritual blessing. Thank you, she would have appreciated the sentiment and probably would have already invited you to stay for breakfast. Thomas pushed himself to his feet, joints protesting the movement. Speaking of which, when was the last time you had a proper meal? Lyralei's eyes darted away from his, shame coloring her features. 3 days ago, maybe 4, time becomes soft when you are very hungry. Thomas felt something twist in his chest, a combination of outrage at the universe's casual cruelty and determination to fix at least this one small piece of it. Right then, emergency protocol activated. He moved to his food preparation station, fingers dancing over the molecular assembler's control interface. Let's see. Protein synthesis at optimal levels, vitamin complex enhanced for non-human physiology, lucky guess there, and enough calories to bring you back to the land of the living. You do not have to, Lyralei began, but Thomas cut her off with a wave. House rules. Nobody discusses anything important on an empty stomach. It's scientifically proven to impair judgment, and I have a feeling we're going to need all the clear thinking we can get. The assembler hummed to life, molecular bonds dancing in precise patterns as it constructed a meal from base elements. Besides, I haven't cooked for anyone but myself in 2 years. Thomas stared at his reflection in the bathroom mirror, questioning every life choice that had led him to this moment. In his hand, Thomas stared at his reflection in the bathroom mirror, questioning every life choice that had led him to this moment. In his hands, he held what could generously be called a hat, and what Elena would have definitely called a crime against fashion. The wide-brimmed monstrosity was designed to accommodate Lyralei's distinctive ears, though the result looked more like a failed experiment in dimensional physics than functional headwear. This is never going to work, he muttered, adjusting the synthetic fabric for the dozenth time. The neural mesh lining was supposed to create a subtle perception filter, making observers' eyes slide past any unusual features. In theory, it was elegant technology. In practice, it made Lyralei look like she was wearing a collapsed space umbrella. Thomas, came Lyralei's voice from the kitchen, carefully pronouncing each syllable in the way she did when nervous. I think perhaps this hat is broken. My ears feel like they are being folded into origami. He emerged from the bathroom to find her sitting at the table, the hat perched at an angle that suggested it might achieve flight at any moment. Her ears were indeed folded in ways that probably violated several laws of physics, and she wore the expression of someone trying very hard not to complain about obvious torture. Right, Thomas said, tossing his hands up in defeat. Plan B it is. There is Plan B, Lyralei asked hopefully, attempting to adjust the hat without actually touching it as if it might explode. Actually, that was Plan B. Plan A was hiding you in the basement until I could forge some documentation, but you pointed out that basements are depressing and you're not a mushroom. Thomas pulled out his quantum tablet and began scrolling through files. This means we're now at Plan C, which involves significantly more criminal activity than I'm comfortable with. Lyralei carefully removed the hat, her ears springing back to their natural position with obvious relief. What is Plan C? Identity construction. We're going to build you a completely legal existence from the ground up, using my connections in the Colonial Science Division, and what Alina used to call my alarming talent for creative bureaucracy. This sounds very illegal. Surprisingly, it's not. Complicated, yes. Ethically questionable, possibly. But technically legal, assuming we can prove you possess skills valuable enough to justify emergency residency status. Thomas pulled up a holographic form that looked like it had been designed by people who genuinely hated trees. The Colonial Science Division has provision for fast-tracking residency for individuals with critical expertise. The catch is proving that expertise without revealing you've been living undocumented for 3 months. Lyralei leaned forward, studying the floating text with interest. What kind of proof do they need? Demonstration of advanced knowledge, peer review of previous work, and recommendation from an established colonial citizen. Thomas grinned. Lucky for you, I happen to be a semi-respected xenobotanist with enough professional credibility to vouch for a colleague's expertise. But I am not your colleague. You are now. As of this morning, you're Dr. Lyralei. What's your family name? Silverwind, though it sounds different in my language. Dr. Lyralei Silverwind, visiting agricultural specialist from the Outer Rim Research Consortium. You've been conducting classified soil analysis for the Colonial Development Project, which is why there's no record of your arrival. Thomas's fingers danced over the tablet's interface, filling in forms with the practiced ease of someone who had spent years navigating academic bureaucracy. The beauty of classified projects is that no one wants to admit they don't have clearance to verify the details. Lyralei watched the fabricated identity take shape with fascination and growing alarm. This seems very complicated for something that is legal. Welcome to colonial administration, where the paperwork is more complex than quantum mechanics and twice as likely to give you a headache. Thomas paused in his typing. The question is, can you actually demonstrate advanced agricultural knowledge if someone calls our bluff? I can make plants grow in space vacuum, Lyralei said matter-of-factly. Is this sufficient demonstration? Thomas blinked. I'm sorry, what now? Quantum-enhanced seeds, environmental manipulation fields, molecular atmospheric processors. My specialty was making food grow in places food should not grow. She gestured vaguely at the air. Your colony farms are very primitive by comparison. No offense. None taken, and also, holy stars, you really are qualified for this. Thomas felt a surge of excitement that had nothing to do with paperwork fraud. Can you really make plants grow in hard vacuum? With proper preparation, yes, though it is easier to just modify the environment. Less dramatic but more efficient for large-scale agriculture. Lyralei, you might just be the most qualified agricultural specialist in this entire sector. Thomas saved the partially completed forms and leaned back in his chair. The Colonial Development Office has been struggling with food production on the asteroid mining stations. If you can solve that problem, they'll fast-track your residency so quickly it'll make your ears spin. My ears do not spin, Lyralei pointed out seriously. They are not mechanical. It's an expression, but good to know for future reference. Thomas stood and began pacing, his mind racing through possibilities. Here's what we're going to do. I'll contact Dr. Sarah Martinez at the Agricultural Institute. She's been working on the asteroid farming problem for 2 years with minimal success. if I can arrange for you to demonstrate your techniques, without mentioning that I am illegal ghost person. Without mentioning that you're an undocumented refugee, Thomas corrected. You're a consultant brought in to solve a critical infrastructure problem. The fact that you happen to be alien just makes you even more valuable. Alien perspectives on agricultural challenges and all that. Lyralei considered this, absently fidgeting with her ears in a way that suggested deep thought. What if they ask questions I cannot answer, about this outer rim research consortium that does not exist? Then you do what every academic does when caught unprepared. You speak very confidently about tangential subjects until everyone assumes you know what you're talking about. Thomas grinned. Trust me, I've built an entire career on this technique. This seems like it should not work. Most of human civilization seems like it shouldn't work. Yet here we are, having breakfast on a terraformed planet while discussing vacuum agriculture with a refugee from a supposedly extinct species. Thomas activated his communication system. Dr. Martinez, this is Thomas Hartwell. I hope I'm not calling too early, but I have someone you need to meet. The holographic display flickered to life, showing a woman in her 50s with the permanent squint of someone who spent too much time staring at soil samples. Thomas, what time is it? Never mind, don't answer that. Please tell me you're calling with good news about the asteroid project. Better than good news, I'm calling with a solution. Thomas gestured for Lyralei to move into the pickup range. Dr. Martinez, I'd like you to meet Dr. Lyralei Silverwind, agricultural specialist. She's been working on some fascinating applications of quantum enhancement in extreme environment farming. Dr. Martinez's tired expression shifted to interest as she took in Lyralei's distinctive features. Alien, unless I'm mistaken, I thought your people were. Reports of our extinction have been greatly exaggerated, Lyralei said smoothly, and Thomas felt a surge of pride at her quick thinking. Many of us have been working quietly in the outer systems, developing techniques for agricultural sustainability in challenging environments. Challenging environments, Dr. Martinez repeated slowly. How challenging are we talking? I have successfully established crop yields in hard vacuum, using quantum-enhanced seeds and localized atmospheric manipulation, Lyralei replied. The techniques scale well for asteroid-based operations. The silence stretched long enough that Thomas wondered if the connection had failed. Then Dr. Martinez leaned forward, her expression intense. Can you be at the Agricultural Institute in 2 hours? And please tell me you're not just passing through the system. Thomas and Lyralei exchanged glances. Actually, Thomas said carefully, Dr. Silverwind is looking for a more permanent position. The outer rim work was fascinating, but she's interested in settling down somewhere with better research facilities. And decent coffee, Lyralei added, which earned her an approving nod from Dr. Martinez. 2 hours, Dr. Martinez repeated. Bring whatever documentation you have and be prepared to explain how you make plants grow in space. If this works, Dr. Silverwind, I can guarantee you'll have more job offers than you know what to do with. The connection closed, and Thomas turned to Lyralei with a grin. How do you feel about your first day as a legally existing person? Terrified, she replied honestly, but also hopeful. Is this how all humans approach complex problems, with elaborate lies and excessive optimism? Pretty much, Thomas admitted, though we prefer to call them creative solutions and strategic confidence. Now, let's get you ready to revolutionize colonial agriculture, and maybe we can find you a hat that doesn't look like it was designed by someone who hates ears. The enforcement officers stood in Thomas's doorway like a collection of bureaucratic storm clouds, their bioscanners already painting ominous red dots across his living room walls. Agent Morrison, a woman whose permanent scowl suggested she'd been personally offended by the concept of joy, held up her identification badge as if it were a weapon. Thomas Hartwell, we have reports of harboring an undocumented alien. Step aside. Thomas remained planted firmly in his doorway, clutching his morning coffee like a shield. Behind him, he could hear Lyralei's quick footsteps as she gathered the research materials they'd been working on all week. Her presentation to the Agricultural Institute had gone so well that 3 different departments were fighting over hiring her. But apparently, someone had noticed the mysterious appearance of New Terra's newest agricultural genius. Harboring is such an ugly word, Thomas said conversationally. I prefer providing humanitarian assistance to a displaced person of exceptional scientific merit. Much more accurate, don't you think? Agent Morrison was not amused. Mr. Hartwell, obstruction of an immigration investigation is a serious offense. So is barging into a colonial citizen's home without proper warrants. But who's keeping track? Thomas sipped his coffee, noting with satisfaction that his hands weren't shaking. Alina would have been proud. She'd always said he did his best work when he was being deliberately annoying to authority figures. We have credible reports. From Mrs. Hendricks next door, I'm guessing, Thomas interrupted. The same Mrs. Hendricks who called enforcement last month because she was convinced her garbage disposal had achieved sentience and was plotting against her. Fascinating woman, but not what you'd call a reliable witness. Agent Morrison's partner, a younger man whose bioscanner was currently having a small existential crisis, as it tried to categorize the exotic plant life in Thomas's conservatory, cleared his throat nervously. Sir, we just need to conduct a standard sweep, if you have nothing to hide. Oh, I have plenty to hide, Thomas said cheerfully. Classified research, proprietary agricultural data, and a sourdough starter that's technically considered a controlled biological agent in 3 systems. But none of that concerns your department. The sound of Lyralei's movements had stopped, which meant she'd either finished gathering her materials or had climbed out the back window. Thomas really hoped it wasn't the latter. They'd worked too hard building her legal identity to throw it all away now. Mr. Hartwell, Agent Morrison said through gritted teeth, you're not making this easier on anyone. I'm not trying to make it easier. I'm trying to make it correct. Thomas pulled out his quantum tablet and activated a holographic display that filled his doorway with official seals and documentation. Agent Morrison, meet Dr. Lyralei Silverwind, agricultural specialist, currently under contract with the Colonial Science Division for critical infrastructure development. The agent's scowl faltered as she took in the impressive array of official documents floating between them. This doesn't match our information. Your information is 3 days out of date, Thomas said smugly. Dr. Silverwind's emergency residency was approved yesterday morning, along with her research visa, work permits, and what I believe you enforcement types call a get-out-of-jail-free card. Agent Morrison's bioscanner chose that moment to detect Lyralei's presence as she emerged from the back of the house, her arms full of research tablets, and wearing the expression of someone who had decided to face whatever came next with dignity. The device immediately began chirping in confused protest, unable to reconcile its readings with the legal documentation floating in front of it. Dr. Silverwind, Thomas said formally, these agents were just leaving. Lyralei stepped up beside him, her elongated ears catching the morning light in a way that made them look almost ethereal. Actually, Thomas, I think we should invite them in for coffee. They look tired, and I imagine immigration enforcement is a very stressful job. Agent Morrison blinked in surprise. You're offering us coffee? Of course. You are just doing your work, and we are grateful for your dedication to colonial security. Lyralei smiled with genuine warmth. Besides, Thomas makes excellent coffee, and I have been hoping to explain my research to more people. Perhaps you would like to hear about